Welcome. What Jacob and I thought we'd start by doing is giving you a little piece of our own experiences. Stewardship in general, at least for me, comes first and foremost and begins with our own experiences of how we approach stewardship and giving and our relationship with God. So a little bit about me. I am from Athens, Georgia. I'm proud to be a Georgia Bulldog. And I was raised in the Episcopal Church. I came to the Episcopal Church because my father, who had sworn after he left the church in his youth that he would never go back, and my mother, who had a church in her youth but had never been a huge part of her life, suddenly had this little baby, and they didn't know what to do with her, but they thought she needed some sort of home, church home. And two very important people in their lives were both Episcopalians. And lo and behold, they thought, well, let's try the Episcopal Church. And they did, and I was baptized there, confirmed there, and later ordained there. So their bringing me to church every week had a profound effect on my own life. And I got out into the world and had no sense of what pledging was about, or what, I'm going to use the term again, sacrificial giving, could do not only for the church, but more importantly for me personally. And I went to seminary and got ordained, and I had that well into my early years as a priest, which weren't that long ago. I was still a fairly new priest, all things considered. And I went through and I figured out my budget for, Chris, come on in. I figured out my budget for where I was going to be in my new apartment in Southside Chicago, and I figured out what was a taxable pledge, what I could put in the plate every month that would not make me look like a complete and total hypocrite when I stood up and preached on the importance of giving. I did it with a little bit of resentment in my heart and was not at all a joyful giver. And before you hear me beat up on myself too much, let me say that I think stewardship is a relationship and something we grow and move into. When I got to St. Peter's, and I suddenly realized that stewardship was going to fall under my domain as the rector, someone wisely recommended to me TENS, which is the Episcopal Network, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, TENS. It's a conference, usually once every year, year and a half, and maybe you ought to go. And so I did. I drove to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which if you've never been to Gatlinburg, you should go. I went to Gatlinburg and I went to the TENS conference where Greg Rickles, who Terry has mentioned, the Bishop of Olympia, Diocese of Olympia, was one of the keynotes, and several other just really powerful speakers. And we met in this hotel that is about the tackiest hotel you can imagine. The swimming pool with the waterfalls had like fake trees growing out. I mean, everything about it was just filled with Gatlinburg tacky. And I had one of those dadgummit conversion experiences. I went back to my room and cried every night because I realized there was some part of me that was longing to give in a way I'd never been challenged to give before, that I wanted part of my narrative to include that I was a joyful and generous giver. And some part of me understood in a way that I continue to wrestle with and try to live into, that my relationship with God was linked with my willingness to live in this world that I preach about, this world that's countercultural, that's not mainstream, that calls for sacrifice as well as abundant love, the world of the Christian life. And that for me, part of that was going to involve a giving of not only self and time and talent, but of my own treasure, which feels, to this day, abundantly limited. And yet it's not. Let me be the first to say I have a very generous salary and package. Thank you, St. Peter's Church. So I began to give more generously. And I will tell you, I am not a tither. I am striving to be a tither. I make around $60,000 a year plus a generous benefits package, and I give around $3,000 a year. So that puts me at right about 5%. I think that's right, isn't it? That's okay. I'm terrible at the math. So that's about where I fall on the scale of things. There are days that it's joyful. There are days that I go, oh, I could use that money for something else. But the truth is, I don't miss it. I don't miss the money. And I love what I see the people of St. Peter's doing in the name of God for this neighborhood and for this community. And so I give. And I hope that when my seminary debt is paid down significantly in about a year and a half, that I will become a tither. That's my prayer with God these days, is I want to be a tither within the next 2 years. So you check back with me in 2 years and see if I'm tithing. That's a little bit about me. Jacob, you have to get on the camera. Or leave out with you.
Yes. My name is Jacob Trimble, and I am a member of the Stewardship Ministry team here at St. Peter's, amongst other things, a vestrant, and I subdeacon and do a couple other things around. And a bit of my story. My adopted hometown is Louisville, Kentucky. I love it. It's a wonderful place. If you've never been, you should go. And my childhood was spent in a wonderful household of unchurched parents with unchurched children. And church was something that we went to maybe once a year. There's a wonderful story, there's a story I have about, we actually went to sunrise service on Easter one time as a child. We left before the service started. So, giving was never a part of my childhood, was never a part of my adolescence, was never a part of my adulthood until I started attending St. Peter's. My partner Levi and I, we met when he was in law school in Indiana and I was an undergrad at Purdue. And we moved to Chicago about 5 years ago. And he is the son of a Southern Baptist minister and has had a long history with giving, with pledging, tithing. That was just an expectation of his father and his mother, and it was an expectation of their children, of Levi and his sister Laura. And as we came to Chicago, we decided that we wanted to go to church. I wanted to go to church. He wanted to find church again after he had lost it for some time. And so we came to St. Peter's on the first Sunday of Advent in 2006, thinking that this was going to be the first church we looked at as we jumped around from place to place, and we never left. We stuck around. So we were here for a couple months, and we had missed the pledge season by a few months. So, we'd had some kind of laying low. No one asked us to do anything. No one asked us to give. And then when stewardship season came around the next year, the chairwoman came up to us and she's like, you guys have been here about a year. How about a pledge? And Levi and I said, okay, well, give us the pledge card. We'll take it home. We'll see what's going on. And we talked about it, and we pledged $300 for the whole year, which represented something like 0.6 of 1% of our income. And personally, I thought I was doing St. Peter's and God a favor. I thought $300, that was big money. Especially for someone who, the very few times I ever went to church, you saw the basket come around and you were lucky to put $1 in, and kind of this token giving. And so, as the year went on, we fulfilled our pledge. I was not a joyful giver. The very little amount of $300 I found griping. I found it, there were times where Levi would write out the check, and I said, do we really have to give this? It was like $15, and I was getting upset over $15. And so the next year came around, and we pledged. I think we increased the pledge, nominally, maybe $50 or something. But this was around the time that Sarah was kind of starting these ideas about changing how stewardship was run at St. Peter's, and she invited Levi to be a member of the committee. And I decided... I'm not entirely sure I'm going to correct that in a minute, but okay.
Well... Yeah, go ahead. But...
Tell your story. I'm an accidental member of this stewardship committee. I wasn't picked to do it. I just kind of tagged along. And so Levi and I kept having these conversations. He would always want to give more, and I was always the one, I was dragging my feet. I wanted to stop. It wasn't important to me. I didn't understand why it was important at all. And so we had these long conversations, and we went to the TENS conference. I went with Sarah, and Levi went with Sarah, and a few others of us went with her to another TENS conference besides the one at Gothenburg. And the same kind of experience she had, I had a very similar kind of turning of myself, reorienting of what I thought was important. And Levi and I, we didn't up our pledge, but we just started giving more. We started giving more. And this year we decided when we pledged that if Levi was going to be the chair of the stewardship committee, I was going to be on the vestry, we were going to tithe. We tithed. We started tithing this year. And I am currently unemployed. I just finished a second bachelor's degree. But I'm going to tell you that in the past 12 months has been the 12 months when Levi and I paid off our credit cards. We started tithing, and we started saving money like we've never saved before, because the money was always there. We always had it if we just had reoriented the way that we were living our life. And so it's been a full just change in myself by reorienting the way that I give money. It's to the church has somehow changed the way that I handle money all throughout my life. And so it's been a wonderful experience that I've had being on this committee and doing this work. So that's kind of why I'm here trying to help out today. So
thank you. I want to throw in a quote that is a paraphrase of Walter Brueggemann, who's just a wonderful scholar. He says, the greatest spiritual crisis in our lives is our relationship with money. And I know for me there is probably no truer statement that my relationship with money as it grows and evolves and it changes is the greatest source of spiritual growth, and the greatest source of spiritual stunted is that relationship. And so I think to be able to talk about it as uncomfortable as it sometimes I know makes me, and I'm sure other people as well, is really important. So that's part of why we tell you our story and a little bit about our relationship with money. As we segue into St. Peter's and what we've done here. And so why do you care about what St. Peter's has done? Well, you may or you may not. We have what I think is, we have a good track record for the past couple of years. We've had over the past 2 years, a 29% increase in our pledge dollars, and we're really proud of that. We think that represents, I will say, as the rector, I think this represents the tremendous work that the stewardship ministry team has done, as well as some changes in the congregation of energies and passions and wanting to fund some of that. So what we're going to talk you through a little bit is how we've been doing it, what we've been doing. Let me say, Terry said it in there, it's really easy to get stagnant in these things, so part of what we're constantly looking to do is to update and change things. So at the end, we're going to throw out a bit of, want to hear from you guys what you think works well, and things you've tried or might be curious to try. So there's going to be time for y'all to talk too. So I'd like to talk just for a little bit about what we did. Jacob mentioned the stewardship chairwoman asking him for a pledge like his first year here. When I arrived, the stewardship committee was a committee of one. And I saw the tail end of 1 year and a full second year happen with a committee of one very burdened person trying to bring in for the whole congregation, trying to rally the whole congregation into their giving. And I thought, wow, that is a huge responsibility to put on one person. How can we begin to change that? And so I asked several people who I said, I'm not asking you to become a committee. I'm asking you to be a book group. Now, Levi will tell you that is a blatant lie. You call me a liar to my face when I say that, and say you knew exactly who you wanted on that committee, and you asked us to read books together. Okay. There's probably, I was hoping some of these people would stay on for the committee, but I thought these were people who were thoughtful, would probably enjoy reading, and would probably bring some different voices to a conversation. Jacob, thanks be to God, decided to tag along and read this book as well. And the book we read is called Creating Congregations of Generous People by Michael Durrell. I'll write that up a little bit later if you remind me. It's an Alvin Institute book. It's one of many wonderful resources about stewardship. But we would read a chapter and then sit around as a group and discuss it. What might we do? Is any of this applicable to St. Peter's? How much of this is not applicable to St. Peter's? But what it began was an organic conversation among people about dreaming about what could be for St. Peter's and what might be for each of us individually to embrace generosity at this level. From that, what grew was a stewardship committee, which I hate committees with a passion, so I said, can we please call it the Stewardship Task Force? And so then it became the Stewardship Task Force until the Stewardship Task Force came to me and said, we hate being a task force, we're in ministry together. Can we be the Stewardship Ministry team? Stewardship Ministry team, which is what they are, and they are a team. Jacob's going to tell you more about this, but I have to say, I used to go to everything, like, book group, I'd go. I may go once a quarter now to check in, frankly, to eat the food because they're phenomenal chefs, and every meeting includes a meal. Just to sort of be a cheerleader, but they are self-sufficient. They do not need the rector popping around, insert her nose in it. This weekend, is all the work of the stewardship ministry team. So I cannot explain enough or emphasize enough how important having good lay leadership in place is. People who love this and are passionate about it and care about the spiritual transformation value of stewardship in our own lives. Not just about balancing the budget, but care about the financial power of stewardship in lives. How much that plays into a successful, at least for us, a successful campaign. At this point, I am going to quit talking and let Jacob do some talking, and we're going to talk about what we did.
I'm going to talk a little bit just about a lot of the work that we did, and like the back of the house, very concrete things that we've done. Sarah has already mentioned it. When we started, it was a committee of one. It was a chairman, chairwoman, who ran the whole thing themselves, and it was run 1 month a year. You would have one Sunday a year where we had a stewardship sermon of some type, and we had pledge cards sent out probably a few weeks earlier. Please bring your pledge cards in or mail them in whenever. And that was basically our stewardship campaign here at St. Peter's for a long time, from what I've been told. And so when Sarah began this, we moved away from a stewardship committee of one. One person can't do everything on their own. One person can't. It's just not possible. And so we moved to a group of people, and there were multiple reasons that we did that, and we had an acronym that we said SAIL. S was for shared workload. By having more than one person on your team, you can delegate tasks to others. Like for this event that we've had, Levi and I delegated to other members, please would you set up the catering for it and decide the catering for it, and it was wonderful. Someone else, we said, would you compile the information for all the booklet? And the booklet that I think that we've given out has a lot of great resources in it. But one person alone probably couldn't have done all of this. So I think that's important. The A was for accountability. By broadening the base of who's running the stewardship campaign, suddenly the community is looking at a committee of 10 people maybe. I think at our largest we were at 10 or 11 people. Unfortunately, we've had one wonderful woman, she moved away, and some other people have since dropped off. But we're on a constant lookout for someone else that wants to be a part of this. It's a constant rebirth and changing and transition in the team, bringing new people in. I was for inspiration. We worked together in these meetings, which we have every single month of the year now. It is no longer just a few in the summer or a few in the fall. We have a meeting every single month. And we begin with Bible study. We begin with a meal and Bible study, and that gives us an opportunity to kind of connect and talk about these things that we've been working on for now a couple of years now to get where we are. And the L is for legitimacy, which connects again to the accountability, that by having a broader base, a spectrum of people from your parish, it's harder to say no to someone on a committee that has someone from different age ranges, from different giving levels, from different sexes, from all kinds of different backgrounds, so that somehow you know that there's been a lot of thought given to all kinds of different things that are happening in your parish. Another thing that we've been doing is we started out by having these things called ministry minutes. And what those were an opportunity for the team to get together and to connect with people who weren't a part of the stewardship team and ask them questions that were not stewardship based, but we were hoping somehow would make a connection between what they're doing and the greater good of the community. And so we would go to people and we would ask you, would you just talk during the liturgy for max 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, and just say, talk about a ministry that you're involved in and why has that changed your life? And why do you think that this ministry is important? And we had some really, really powerful things that people said on Sunday mornings in front of the whole congregation that you know, I think had an impact.
Pop in and say something about that. I have to tell you, I was absolutely terrified of bringing in ministry minutes. St. Peter's has this very specific liturgy, and we're a little bit on the high side of liturgical life. I thought people are going to go nuts with sort of this testifying in the liturgy. People on the whole really were receptive to it. It was a great way, and it was a great way to sort of advertise without even needing to. Some of the ministries that were going on in this place. One of the things we've had to work on, and we've kind of given them a hiatus for a few months because they needed a hiatus. I'm a big believer in changing things up. We're actually going to have one tomorrow. But we've had to sort of tighten up with a reminder of 90 seconds. 90 seconds can easily become 4 minutes. And focus. We've had to, what you're focusing on. But they're a great way to do things, and they surprise people. I mean, in the beginning a lot. And the feedback I've gotten has been almost entirely good. So.
Yeah, so basically in another tradition you might call them testimonials. You know, in the Baptist tradition that's probably what you would have called them or whatnot. But Sarah's right. We've decided as a ministry team, we've kind of let them fall off for a little while because we've thought, you know, we have different ways that we want to connect with people. We don't want this to become just stale and whatnot. We want it to be something that is transformative, and if you do it all the time, it loses some of its. So they may come back in the future, but right now we've kind of stopped scheduling them.
One thing I wanted to point out that I failed to do is that in your notebook, you'll find us behind the purple page. I'm not going to ask you to turn to it now, but some of the things we're highlighting, we've given you samples of. And the next thing that we're going to highlight, which is our points to ponder, there is a sample in there of what we did. You want to briefly say what points to ponder are?
Points to ponder were something that we came up with that every single week for several months before the stewardship campaign, in which we hold in October, we put inside of the bulletin a question of some type that was sometimes very related to money, sometimes very related to stewardship, and sometimes they weren't related to it at all. And inside your folder, we gave you the list of the ones that we had come up with. And so we would highlight them sometimes at the announcements and say, you know, read your point to ponder this week and just, you know, kind of think about, you know, what's your answer to that.
What we didn't do is follow up on that. So we didn't come up afterwards and say, well, what did you ponder about your points to ponder? And that would be one possible thing to do. One thing that I will say we're doing for this coming year, sneak preview for those of you all at St. Peter's, is Betty Hickman's inspiration actually, is our campaign this year is not going to be money focused at all, which is a little scary, but it's going to be about stories, hearing each other's stories. Because I think that is what, if you hear it, I think stewardship is so connected to relationship and knowing each other and story that we're willing to take that risk and take some of the focus. I mean, of course we will talk dollars at some point, but we're going to put some of the focus back on story. Points to ponder at their best, along with ministry minutes, are ways for people to connect their story with the giving of the church. And they're just little pointing in a direction kind of things that we do. Next thing is pretty obvious, a newsletter article. Our newsletter goes out once a quarter, once every other month. And there's almost always something from someone in stewardship to think about. So that it's always in front of you. Always in front of you.
Right.
You want to add anything on that?
I don't know. She had mentioned about the changing of our theme for our stewardship campaign this coming up year. Last year our theme was grace, gratitude, and generosity. And we think that it was, I mean, even looking back, I still think it was a good topic. We were trying to focus people on the gift, their financial gifts. And like she said, this year we've decided that our focus is going to be called Our Stories. And it's all going to be focused on just making the connection between my life in St. Peter's and my life of how I give to St. Peter's and how that's transforming myself in the community. So it's a different focus, and like she said, thanks to Betty Hickman, it came from you. You are our inspiration for this. So.
Yeah, and we're going to be all going to be doing something else, by the way. This is what happens when you come.
Another thing we did was, what we found, at least at St. Peter's, was there was ignorance almost about the stewardship words that we use. Pledge, tithe, things like.
An example I'll give you comes not from St. Peter's, so it's a safe one for me to go. In my first parish, I had somebody who was shocked, absolutely shocked, when his pledge statement came. He said, why do I have a zero balance? I put in $20 every week. And we said, well, how do you put it in? Well, I just put it in the plate, in cash. Well, there's no way for us to tell you that your pledge needs to be tied with something, whether it's you putting $20 in an envelope with your name on it or a check. But this was not a dumb man. This was a very smart young lawyer who just didn't realize that throwing the $20 in a plate without any identification was in no way crediting his pledge that he'd made. But we just thought he wasn't going to make his pledge. So education on those things is really important.
And that's what education, and I think that still to this day we still see that we have a lot of opportunities to work education into our church life. And this was one of our early attempts to work on that. So, and I think the stewardship activities are also in your
You have to copy those for you to see.
One of the things that I really liked about what we did last year was we compiled a meditation booklet. And what we did was, last summer, we asked people from the parish, a very large cross-section of the parish, to contemplate what stewardship means and to write a meditation for it. And we created a booklet that had one meditation per day all through the month of October. And we offered it starting in September, and it was available all through October and all through November, so that people could just pick one up and day by day just open it up and see someone's name attached to a meditation based on stewardship in some way. Some of them were, just really magnificent, and we put 3 examples inside of your booklet so that you could see just kind of an example of what we had done. We're not going to do the meditation booklets again this year because we feel that we've got to constantly change the way that we reach out because we don't want it to get stale. But to do the same type of work that we're wanting to do, we're actually going to do it's ambitious, but we're actually going to be taking videos and talking to people in the parish, editing it, and then hopefully releasing it one day at a time online on YouTube or on our Facebook account. And we'll be for those in our parish who don't have that, we will also at some point have them here in the church on a television that we can watch. And so it's the opportunity for our community to say on camera and in front of all of us, this is what my story is. This is what this means to me, and we think that's going to make a strong impact on the community. Or at least we hope that it will this year. So come back next year, ask me how it went, and we'll tell you.
The one thing I would add about the meditation booklet is that it really did, I think, an important job, and I think to talk numbers for a minute, I think our numbers support what I'm about to say. By inviting people into the pondering of what stewardship or what gift giving means in their lives, we expanded the ownership. So it wasn't just about a committee of 10. It was, if you'd taken the time to write that, you'd had to think for a little bit about what it did mean to you. So we instantly have more people who are invested, maybe this is ambitious, but perhaps strengthen the faith of the folks who are writing. And I think the opportunity to do that. everywhere you can look for a chance to engage more is really important in this work.
Number 9 is we basically completely redid the way that we did our stewardship letters.
Sample of this in your book too.
There's a sample of our stewardship letter in your book, and it's the merge form that we used. And when you read through it, you'll see the lines where it's blank.
To take back to anybody who's taking this back to their pastors, this is the stuff that kept me, this more than anything else kept me up at night. I have more anxiety about this than anything else. So
This caused a lot of us on the team anxiety, but with the prodding of the forward development canon in the Diocese of Chicago, we went with it. And what we did was we went to specific asks. We came together, Sarah and the stewardship chair, Levi, got together privately, and they made pastoral decisions looking at people's pledges from the past, looking at trend lines of how people were doing, and Sarah's just intimate knowledge of how people are faring in the parish. And we went to specific individual asks.
Increased asks.
Increased
I think
asks.
on average it was a 25% increase we asked for.
But it was not formulaic. We didn't say, $400, example, $400, increase it to $500. It was, this person, I'm seeing, these kinds of
They're
things.
giving more of their time and
They're getting more invested. Let's ask for an increased investment in their financial giving. And like Sarah said, we sent out the letters and we waited by the phone for days. We you just put it in the mail. They're in people's mailboxes the next day.
There was no sleep that night.
It was in the mailbox the next day. We were waiting by the phone. We were waiting for the phone calls. They didn't come. They didn't know when the next day the phone calls didn't come. The next day the phone calls didn't come. And
what did come? Market increases in
Market
pledges.
increases
On the
in
whole,
people's
I would
pledges.
say 60 to 70% of people increase their pledge.
to some degree.
And let me be clear, they asked me for an increase that I did not make. I did not increase to the level that my letter asked me to make, but I increased my pledge. So there was a market increase in pledge by asking. Ask for what you want.
There were several, and I mean more than 1 or 2 people, who we asked for an increase of a fairly significant amount, and they sent in more. They sent in more. There were a lot of people who said, yeah, I can give that. And then there were a lot of people who said, I can increase, but maybe not this much. So it was, we were really moved by the fact that just by asking, people gave. Whereas before, all we said was basically, please support the church.
Here's the other story that is worth knowing too, is one person said, oh, okay, I've never had any idea how much I should give. This is somebody I think had been given maybe $100 a year. And I think we asked to go to like 500.
I think it was
it was more. It was higher than that. And met the request. And the response was, nobody's ever told me what to give before. I didn't really know. So ask.
And I'm sure that there are some of you that are like, I can't ask for specific amounts. I think that is one of the key pieces about what we have done in terms of increasing our pledges. Just asking is going to be a big thing. But the thing about before you ask is there has to be a foundation laid between the team and the rector to make sure that everyone's on board. That everyone's
don't
on the
do this
same
stuff
page.
on your pastor.
Everyone's got to be on the same page. And it took us. We didn't do it for 1 year because we were too concerned. We waited a whole other year before we felt like we were ready to do it. But it's something that I would highly recommend to do. We had, this year, for the first time, we had a festive meal. And what that was in our guild room, we hosted a meal the night before our big stewardship liturgy, in-gathering liturgy. And what that was we sent out paper invitations to the whole church. Please, no donations. We wouldn't accept donations. It doesn't cost anything. Please, just come. So we had about 60 people in the church show up. And we had a marvelous speaker come in. And he was a lay person from Indiana. And he was asked to talk about stewardship, how it had affected him. And his discussion was the feeling that he got from the people in his church who loved him when his wife died of cancer. He didn't talk about money. He didn't talk about finances, he talked about the way that the people of his church took care of him. And it really made, I think, a strong connection for a lot of people about what stewardship is. Stewardship's not just, our financial commitments, but by increasing stewardship in all parts of our lives, our financial stewardship will also probably increase.
A note about the festive meal. Jacob's already said it, but I want to point it out. This was a meal where the goal was to model abundance and generosity as we, the hosts, have experienced it through the people of the parish, and we hope the people of the parish experience it. So it was designed to be, this is a model of how you model abundance. You want what easy way to model abundance? Invite people over for dinner and give them somebody great to listen to, and don't charge them a penny. Don't let them help set the table. Don't take their donations. Just let them enjoy. That was our goal. If you are at all interested in this, this is the TENS conference, which we've mentioned a couple of times. They begin their conference by modeling it. It's frankly part of why we started our conference last night with a meal. Is that idea of you come in, you're treated well, you get to have conversation with people, you have pretty good food and stuff like that. That you enjoy yourself and that you're able to experience a tiny sliver of God's good abundance in some place you weren't expecting it necessarily. That's how TENS runs their stewardship conference, and they have a book, I believe, on how to run
on how to run one of those.
On how to run one of those, which if you look at TENS, that's a great place to do that, and I'll get you all this info if you need it. So I actually think, and I will say, here's the place where our vestry was like, you want how much money to have a meal that people aren't going to pay for? Why? It came back in spades. It came back in spades. I mean, being generous begets being generous. So, and I don't think the vestry batted an eye when we asked for the money again this year.
And another thing I want to add about that is the book that she mentions. We got the idea for the way that we did it out of the TENS book. However, we took it and we modified the way that we did it. We didn't do it exactly the way that they did it. And the reason that we did that is because the next days we host an in-gathering liturgy. The way they do it is your whole financial pledge happens that night, whereas for us, we break it up into two events. We have a meal where there's nothing required, and then the next day we have our own liturgy. But it works. Some parishes find that other models work. So a bit about our in-gathering liturgy. We have a lay preacher that day. They speak about the gospel just like Sarah does any other Sunday of the year. They take the readings for the day and they preach on it, trying to make a connection with stewardship. And there's infinite ways on almost every gospel reading to do that. But not only do we have it on this one day a year, we've actually gone to a model where we have lay preaching multiple times in October. In fact, this year we're going to have lay preaching
Starting and finishing.
We're going to have three stewardship Sundays in our pledge campaign, and two of them are going to be preached by a lay preacher. And that gives the parish the ability to see people who are usually sitting next to them, proclaiming the gospel and proclaiming the stewardship, to them. So it has a different impact than when Sarah stands up, or when another clergy person from another church comes and speaks to us.
And I mean, this kind of, I guess, goes without saying, but let's be blunt. Those pledges pay my salary. So, yeah, of course I want you to pledge. I want to have a job. I mean, I want you to pledge for a million other reasons. But when Jacob preaches about it, it's a markedly different story. Because in the back of many people's heads is, well, of course she wants us to pledge, or else she's not going to have a paycheck. So I think it's really powerful to hear that witness.
You said there were 50 people at your stewardship dinner?
There were almost 60.
Yeah. About what percentage of the parish was that?
On a normal Sunday, we probably have 85 people. So we had a good 2/3 of the people in the parish there, which was fantastic. It really was. So
the other in-gathering liturgies are as varied as parishes. For us, what's worked is lay preaching, special prayers of the people that I think we modified some we found, but they're wonderful. Levi, who y'all all met by now, wrote a collect that we use every year. Space in the liturgy for people to bring their pledges forward. I think that's really important. And then we place the pledges on the altar and offer them to God in Thanksgiving. So that's a little bit of what we do in our in-gathering liturgy. Followed by, very important,
Weekly updates.
thank you.
We have weekly updates after we begin the pledge campaign. We have weekly updates through November, December there. You'll get probably, I'm sure those of you who have run one of these before, you know you'll get about a third of them the first Sunday, you'll get another 10 the next Sunday, you'll get 8 the next Sunday, you'll get 5 the next Sunday. So it's a constant, we constantly are updating the parish on how we're doing it. The way that we're doing that, thank you.
Yeah, that's like
Well,
the most important thing.
We moved to handwritten thank yous and sending them out. We don't send them out in January, we don't send them out in February. We send them out the week that you send your pledge in. And what we think that does is that we are thanking you immediately, just like we would do in our own personal lives, thanking someone for a gift that they've made. One thing that we do in the thank you cards is we put the specific amount. You have pledged this number for this year. And what that is that's a secondary kind of check. We had 1 or 2 people that said, this isn't the right amount, I actually pledged, higher, or oh, I'm sorry, I didn't pledge $10 million, I pledged $10, or something,
Amazing what a difference a decimal point
Yes.
makes.
So that was one of the reasons that we did that.
We talk about weekly updates. So
Visual aid.
Do we have a picture of that?
Oh, no, I don't. This year was the first year that we'd ever done a visual aid, and kind of like, I don't know what her name was, talking about the feat that she did in the and then their church's narthex, What we did this year was we had a tree. We made a tree, I made it out of crepe paper, we put it on the wall in the guild room, and I cut like 75 leaves of fall colors. And then as pledges rolled in, I bubbled in people's names and I put it onto the tree so that the tree started to get leaves as people pledged. And what we thought that did was it gave people a visual weekly reminder of pledging, of people who had intended to pledge. It's like, oh, I just forgot my pledge card, or I wasn't there on in-gathering Sunday. It just gives them a reminder of doing it. This year we're going to change it because this year we're going to have our story be the theme. I think we're actually going to have something like a bookshelf with books in it. I think is the plan for us this year. Something to that, something like that. Somehow that connects to the theme that we're doing.
Last but not least.
We did several weeks, maybe a couple months later, we did a planned giving workshop.
Which, if you have partners in crime here, some of them may be hearing that now.
I'm hearing it, yeah. Levi's giving that right now. And what we've been trying to do is create this idea of year-round stewardship, that October is not stewardship month, every month of the year is stewardship month. And so this was one of the first events that we did to kind of start getting people thinking about stewardship, not just in terms of October Pledge Campaign, get people thinking about different events. In this planned giving, we talked about bequests, but we also talked about wills, powers of attorney, getting people thinking about healthcare, what's healthcare going to look like for them when they retire, when they get older. Then the following Sunday, we actually had Sarah and Nathaniel, our organist. They planned a funeral planning session where we sat around. We picked our hymns, we picked our scripture readings, we picked, do we want right 1, do we want right 2, what do we want said about us when...
Do you want a eulogy, do you want the preacher to preach,
Exactly.
What do you want? Communion, no communion. Because I will say, here, just a side note, there's nothing more frustrating as a priest than having a longtime member who you love and trying to pick out the hymns that you think they love the most and you don't know. And trying to remember which gospel passage they love the most. And wanting to do right by them, but not being 100% sure, and having the family go, I don't know what mom would have wanted. So one of the things that in our Book of Common Prayer that clergy are reminded, it's part of the job of the clergy, is to remind people to have wills. And I would include in that, plan your funeral, because, this is the time to play for favorite hymns, you know, and play the favorite scripture. So anyway, sorry, that's a side note. Plan Giving Workshop was really, and I don't know that a ton of people automatically connected it to stewardship, but we saw it very much as part of the holistic piece of year-round. You know, this is giving to the congregation information they need, as well as asking, please remember us in your wills.
And part of it,
You're right. Plan giving has nothing to do with stewardship. Stewardship is a lifestyle.
Yes, you're correct.
Plan giving is, some people think they're punching their ticket, they have it when they're giving something. in
Well, no, that,
their
we're not.
will, and it
and that-
isn't that at all.
No, but it is helpful when you're looking at
It's just a fundraiser.
okay. Well, we very much felt that what we did was holistic in terms of looking at all of your life and all of your end wishes and making sure that the church had the role appropriate to you in that, whether that's being remembered in your will, whether that's having the funeral that you want. All of that was a big part for us of tying in. Again, it goes back to relationships. Stewardship's about relationship. Tying in that so that there was something more than just this is a vehicle that I want. So that was something we did. Areas of challenge?
you know, all the changes that we've made in that it's a journey. We've got a lot of things that we want to continue working on making better that we've done before, and new things that we want to do. And you know, it hasn't been all, you know, I can stand up here and think that the last 2 years it's been real easy, but there's been a lot of sweat and tears, you know, poured into the work. And you know, some of the areas of challenge we had is we sometimes find that broadening the committee can be a difficult task. It was great when Sarah, I mean, she basically in one day was able to kind of build the core that we've now had for a time. And while we've had some people come on and come off, we haven't had a massive influx of people. And it's something that we right now are discerning amongst ourselves. We're discerning with Sarah, we're discerning amongst ourselves as a committee of how do we broaden our appeal? How do we broaden the base? How do we broaden the committee? And that is something that I think is going to be something we're going to have to discern for the rest of our lives as we're doing this, because it's every day you're going to find someone new walking through your doors, and they're going to be just like, I mean, kind of like what Tara said, a whole new bundle of gifts and a whole new bundle of things to learn from each other. So, you know, we're trying to best figure out how to bring people into the committee, which I think we've got some ideas. But
One thing I'd like to add, I don't know if we made it clear, is that our stewardship meetings are always open to members of the parish. And I don't know that you hit this home enough. Levi and Jacob are phenomenal cooks, and they are wonderful, wonderful offering hospitality. I recognize this isn't possible for every group to do, but one of the things they've done is they start with a meal and with prayer and reflection, so that you come into a meeting knowing you're going to be fed really well, and that you're going to be fed spiritually and you're going to be fed physically. So if you accomplish nothing else, you're fed, and from there the work begins. And I think that sort of grounding has been really important in the cultivating of the community of that group, which then transfers to the whole community. And those meetings, you know, we publish it every so often, and people have yet to take us up on it, but those meetings are open to the community. You know, if you want to come explore see what's happening in stewardship, come. We'll feed you too. You know, I mean, so that's and again, and our hope in that is that at some point we'll join a committee that I enjoy. It's not a committee; it's a ministry team. But you know, go on and interrupt.
Are you open to a new idea?
We're open to many new ideas.
Try one that I've been doing for years, a no-name pledge.
and what is that?
Well, it's between them and God. And they just vote on the pledge card that they have made a pledge, so that you know that they have made the pledge. But they're the only ones, they and God are the only ones that know how much they pledge.
Yep, that is definitely a technique I've
And
heard
we
about.
found that to be very successful for many years.
Oh, good.
Unfortunately, we won't do it now, but it works.
I've heard about that, and I've heard other people talk about that. And We've talked about similar types of situations at St. Peter's, and I think at this time we just decided that it wasn't culturally part of who we are to do that. And we thought we felt it was important for people to, we feel that money it's a central part of who we are. It represents, every time that I spend my money, it is somehow a representation of who I am. By every dollar that I spend, whether I'm spending it in the church or if I'm spending it out in the world, it's a piece of me, and it says something about my values. And we decided as a committee that we wanted transparency, and we wanted people to make a strong connection between themselves, their money, and the road that we're on in life. And we thought that by making anonymous pledges, we thought that did not connect with what we wanted to do. So that's why we decided to do what we did. We decided that we wanted for people to make the connection between their pledges and the church, and for it to be, for us, we've decided that it's not all secret. For us, we've decided that money is something to be spoken about in the open. It's something for us to talk about in lots of different ways. So that's kind of where we've gone.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, please.
On those nominating pledges, where they tend to be fairly small amounts? Were those nominating pledges, they tend to be small amounts?
Small amount?
Yeah.
No,
It's curious.
thousands of dollars.
Really?
Great.
Most of our pledges are in the $1,000 category.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I always thought, I think there's some people in our church that for whatever reason are embarrassed about not feeling they can pledge, but they think they should pledge or what have you. And I always thought that's sort of an embarrassment. So I've been interested in that was not the case.
Well, I mean, you have to find what works for your community and your culture and your congregation. And we're a parish that's really vast in our demographics and in our financial demographic. We have folks who live in public housing. We have folks who don't have homes. And we have folks who have abundant wealth. They run the spectrum. So I was aware, and somebody was talking about that we should get rid of dollar bills because it would make all the plate offering go up. We should only have $5. There are people I know who put $1 in the plate, and that is the widow's mite for them. It is everything they have, and they're giving it to the church. So please never, ever mock or make fun of or look down on a gift of $1 or less, because for all you know, that is all somebody has. And stewardship is not about raising money. It's, as you've already said, it's a way of life, and it's a way of changing spiritual. It's a holy habit, spiritual discipline, and a way of changing and deepening our relationship with God and with our community. So I'm very much a believer that it's not about what you give, it's really about why you give and how you choose to order your life around what you give or don't give. I'm going to open it up to more questions in a second, but before I forget, these are some resources that we have found helpful. This is the first book I was telling you about, Creating Congregations of Generous People by Michael Doral. This is an Alvin Institute book, and this is the book that started it all with our stewardship ministry team. This is what we started talking about. The S-Word Reflections on Stewardship, with practical program suggestions. And I am their biggest cheerleader, TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I believe it's TENS.org. If you Google the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, you'll come right to it. Their conferences are second to none, and their materials are also really, really excellent for stuff like that. I'd like to circle back, and I'd like to hear from y'all. How are we on time?
You're not pledging to a budget, though. It seems clear that you prepare your budget after you find out what your funds are going to be.
I'm going to check my time really quick. Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah, we, on the vestry, the budget is
We're
drawn out.
almost out of time.
Okay.
One of the things I guess I would ask, I had questions for y'all, but let me at this point say, are there questions?
I noticed from your writer, I gather that you have a skewed distribution of pledges like everybody else.
Yes, and they, what we put in there, what time are we going to?
2:30?
So what you'll find in there is, the write-up is what we put in our annual report from Stewardship about where that is. And yes, we have some.
And I wonder if you would have any special attention to those people when they're at the lower end of the scale. I mean, that's the problem, I think the problem we have at our church, we'll have, I'd say maybe 37% of our people give total of 10% of the total amount of dollars. And I think it's, I don't know quite how to direct to that group of people.
Are you saying the folks that give the most, make up the bulk of the budget? Is
That's
that-
pretty true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most churches should be
Yeah,
on that.
that's pretty true.
Yeah.
And that's not the point. I do think that we've got, what I'd say about 37% give, less than a couple $1,000 a year or so. And I think that's, I don't know how you reach that group.
Well, I mean, I think some of that depends on who's in that group. If those are folks for whom a gift of $100 a year is a stretch.
That's not the case.
Okay, then that's a different thing. Then some of that has to do with a lot of, I think, what Terry's talked about, of education. I think the idea of cottage groups is great in that, which is actually probably where we're going to go in the future, is either cottage groups or sort of beginning one-on-one dialogues with people. I go back to the story I told you a minute ago about the person who was given $100 and then we asked for $500 or $1,000 or whatever it was and said, oh, I never had any idea you needed that much money. Or that you do, I mean, hopefully eventually your education will be, you give what, we strive for the tithe and we give what we can in return to God for what we have. And that may be $5,000 or $10,000 or $200. But until you kind of get there, it may also do well to begin those conversations with folks and to ask for more, just ask for more. You had a question.
I wanted to know, when it came to the size of your stewardship team, what ratio that was to your membership? And you said it's down a little bit now. Is it more manageable with fewer people, or like if you have 100 members, you started with 10?
We started with like 10-ish, and I think we have like 7-ish now, and so that's about a tenth of the congregation.
Give or take. Yeah, because we have an 80 to 90 average in the team.
And I assume that these meetings that you hold monthly are on a weeknight?
They're on a weeknight.
Have good success with
Yeah, we basically get together, we hash out a calendar.
How long do those meetings go?
We do ours. They start at 7. We start dinner at 7, and one of us is reading the Bible story or the Bible, whatever we're doing, while the rest of us are eating, and we discuss the Bible over dinner, and then dinner lasts however long.
Yeah.
And then we get to the bulk of the work, and I mean, we really try to be done at 9 p.m. with the work. And so it runs 7 to 9. If people stay, a lot of times people just stay, we'll just socialize and whatnot, but the work ends at 9.
I will say that I see this as probably the most, what's the word I want to use? Of the functioning committees at St. Peter, right now I hate the word committee, but I mean, so ministry teams, it's one of the more vibrant ones because I think people actually enjoy getting together and then they end up doing really productive work, which I think is a big model for the church.
Yes.
Wow, what does it feel like if you don't go, oh God, I gotta get to that meeting? Instead you're like, I can't wait, tonight's stewardship night.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go, I'm gonna see my friends, I'm gonna have a decent meal. Now, I'll play devil's advocate too and say time is a precious commodity and you know, if it doesn't work for you to do it that way and it works to do a 12:30, 30-minute meeting, do that too. When I arrived at St. Peter's, this then senior warden said to me, well, here's what you need to know. If we ain't eating, we ain't meeting. And she laughed and I laughed. She wasn't kidding. St. Peter's doesn't get together if there's not food involved. So for our community, having a discussion like this over dinner really works. Whether it worked for our community, no clue. But for us, it's worked really well. And there are times when I'll say like, oh, I can't do this, but I'd like to meet with you. Let's meet on, can you come in on Monday at 6 and we'll be done by 7? Or can you stay after Mass? But on the whole, always rooted, starting first in prayer and in Bible study. If there are no other burning questions, I looked at my timer and we have a couple minutes left. I'd like to hear from y'all. I'm curious what stewardship means for you as individuals, and how you see it in your parish. How does it shape and form the life of your parish? Either one of those, I'm curious about, if you have feelings about that.
As I said, stewardship is a lifestyle. I'm here on earth to serve others. My Lord came here to save, and by His grace, He saved us. And I'm here to work for Him and to serve Him with everything I've got, all my time, talent, and treasure.
Yeah.
And as we say, all things come from Thee, O Lord, and of Thine own have I given Thee. So one thing she said about stewardship this morning, when she mentioned that. That's stewardship.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see stewardship play out in the life of your church? How does it form the life of your church?
How's it? Well, we have a very strong, I think, stewardship program. We've had it through the years. I've done many of the things that you've done. I love the meditation booklet, but what I try to do there is to get people to witness in church. Give that meditation in church. I think it's more effective to hear the spoken word. I know that one year we had one of my dear friends who was dying from cancer. I think everybody in the parish knew that. And she witnessed to us what stewardship meant to her and what our parish meant to her within a year of her death. And it wasn't a dry eye in the parish.
Right, yeah. You know, Jacob spoke about the festive meal we did, and the power of hearing somebody talk about stewardship in a totally new way, that here was this man and said, my church, from the time my wife began her battle with cancer until after she died, this is how they were stewards to me. To hear that was a really prophetic and powerful witness. And you know, when you talk about conversion experiences, for me that was another sort of little shift in my own journey of like, oh yeah, this is what stewardship is about. Absolutely.
In response to your question to me, we don't have a parish of wealthy people. In fact, I'd say a very large percentage of our parish are retired people. I'd say probably at least, I just asked our rector today, I'd say about 20 to 25% of our parish is represented by people that are retired. We have one gift that I would say is from wealth. The rest of it is people giving from what they earn, and not because they're wealthy people.
But we've been doing on Sunday, we have and some school. And we try to pick people from different stages of their life. Yeah. And I think that's really the most effective thing. But we need to revamp our program and get more. Stewardship it's important in the sense that we try to, it does tie, I'm involved in the finance committee too, so I'm a big believer tying into the budget. I know that's not what other people think, but it works very closely with us. And we have a big outreach program. We try to do more. That's one of the ways we encourage people to give. We point out that we're giving maybe 18-20% of our money to outreach. That includes the diocese too, which I think is a form of outreach. And we try to stress that. But we're trying to be also very open on how we spend our money. Our budget is very transparent. And we make that very clear in our annual meeting. It's very clear how the money goes, and different categories show you the sensible conditions. So we're very clear about that. And we try each quarterly is to come out and say, this is where we stand on pledges. We're on target where our pledges are. And if we're not on target, we'll go back and have to revise our budget. And our income in the last 5 years since gets dropped because of the decline in membership. But we've tried to deal with our budget to account for that, so we can still, in a sense, run a closed service and really keep it with a commitment to outreach.
That's great. Other folks, stewardship, how it affects your life, or your church's life?
I think it does function somewhat. It's my experience in our church, and we're not a large church, and we're not a particularly wealthy church either. But it does function as a miracle when you go to your vestrant meeting and you're looking at which actually to know where it's coming from. Because if you know many of the individual stories of your parishioners, you know that these times are a little troubling for a lot of folks. And so it's inspirational. does make a difference in your life. I mean, I have found personally that since I'm more involved in stewardship and giving and understanding what it means, it is amazing how things come back to you. But you, as you said, Joe, maybe it's just reprioritizing. You know, your life changes in some ways. And,
I think that question of reprioritizing and Levi has hit this home for me a lot. What does it mean to give sacrificially? Like, it's like if you don't feel the change, there should be some oomph in there when you start giving sacrificially. And I'm always like, oh, he's right, because I try, and sometimes I do better, and sometimes I don't, but to do that myself. And I think that there's just, I mean, I guess I can't stress enough how much I think there's relationship in this, and our relationship with our community and our relationship with God, and that our giving reflects that. I love that notion of, here's what we think of you, God. I mean, like, it's painful because it's true. Like, oh, well, here you go. I mean, if called into accountability, what do I really value? And I think, at the risk of rehashing what Terry's already said, in a world that tells us we need more of this, and this, the church runs countercultural and says, let's give it away. Except that in our own churches we run into scarcity. I know this to be true in here. I mean, let me be clear, we've had a tremendous upping in pledges over the past 2 years. Delightful. We are thrilled, and we still run a major deficit. I'm still really anxious about what's going to happen with the boiler this winter. So, I mean, there's still the realities of running a building, but I have to believe that there is transformation that is happening in that, and that at the same time as I'm watching us move more and more into worlds of outreach here and reaching out to our neighbors, that's reflected in the giving, that's reflected in some of the work we do together, I mean, all that. So it's all of a piece, but there's a reason why it's one of the holy habits. There's a reason why giving is an important part of our biblical heritage.
Being thankful is part of that whole circle too. I mean, I find myself being so much more aware in gratitude for my life and what I have. And I don't think I would have ever been able to recognize that level of gratitude without the whole circle.
Thank you.
One last thing, I do think the more you can get people involved with programs, and different programs that feel that we just started a group called Family. Now we're part of a network of Family Promise, where there's about 13 churches, and what they do every quarter, we make our church for a week home to some homeless people.
Yeah.
We provide food and that sort of thing. And it's gotten a bunch of people interested in it. It's not something I'm particularly interested in, a lot of other people are. And more programs like that get different groups of people involved in things tied into the church, I think eventually will help with stewardship, because they see it in a real way. And so I think she brought that up to me too.
Yeah, this is Kenny Callahan, who's just one of he's a church growth expert. I mean, one of his main line part, this is not exactly a line stewardship, but close. His whole thing is money follows mission. Like, if you've got a mission, the money to fund it will come. If you're floundering around trying to figure out what you're doing, then sometimes it's harder to find that money. And I think people in general give to stuff they're passionate about. I mean, like, think about where you give your money. I mean, like, I'm passionate about my seminary. I want to stay up and I'm happy to send some money that way. So, passionate about NPR, so I can send them some money too. The places that we're passionate about, the places we care about. Well, so what is the church passionate about? So, I mean, I think those are always good things. Mission is always a good thing. I think we're getting close to time. We go to till 45 after.
Yeah, and we have a.
And I'm sorry, I never wear a watch, and I couldn't when I
So it's 2:30, 2:35.
Okay. So at this point, let me say, are there questions, thoughts, things you want to share? Things you're curious about?
Have you ever spent time talking to newer people and what their concept of giving is and how they approach it? I mean, I sort of worried sometimes we sort of take a top-down approach on what we think is the right thing to do. And I just wondered, from people just coming in, what's been their experience in giving? And I can't help but some people think it's like kind of joining a club with the dudes sort of thing. And I just wonder if you've done any kind of research on how to reach those people.
I think I think one of the former chairs of stewardship used to say stewardship ain't for sissies, because you have to go to the uncomfortable places. And I know for me, as somebody who meets with people who are new in the church, one of the things that I have tended to shy away from until a little bit more recently is actually talking about, giving is part of it. When people say, how do you become a member? Well, you come to church. If you are not an Episcopalian, you might want to consider being received or confirmed. And you have a gift. You give of your time and your talent, and your treasure. And so that's something I'm moving into. I would in no way say that I'm great at it yet, but that's something I know I'm working into. I think that becoming more of the ethos of the parish is a continual paradigm shift. But you are absolutely right. The big question, and here, this is not a big question in the grand scheme of things, but this is one that's ever before that my clergy colleagues and I go around and around with this. If you have a kit, if you have the newcomer station or the newcomer bag or the newcomer folder or whatever it is, do you include a pledge card in it? Well, if you do, does it look like you're standing here with your hand out? And if you don't, you have Jacob and Levi who were here for a full year and never given the opportunity to pledge. I mean, should the rector have said to them, so glad you're here, where's the pledge card? Or should the newcomer committee have said, I don't know the answer. This is a short answer.
Or it could be writing a letter. It could be just writing a letter in a more informal way of saying that this is how we finance things in our church. Here's what our budget and stuff looks like, and then this is why we ask people to make a commitment, and then something like that.
One of the things that we as a committee have been talking about, and we've talked about with you, is that in the future, trying to connect the dots of mission, of what's the mission of the church, and connect the dots between newcomers, oldcomers, our mission, and our money. And so what we've been talking about is having the stewardship committee being, stewardship ministry team being sent out by the vestry to basically kind of do like a 6-month study of the church with perhaps surveys, with perhaps one-on-one conversations, with perhaps any number of forms of communication to get to the information that you're asking about. Because we think that in the future, that not this year, but maybe next year, the following year, the way that we build our stewardship committee is going to be built more and more and more around the mission of what's going on here, and to find out what people want.
I'd like to put a picture. We're just going through a rector search now, and one of the things we did use the congregational assessment tool for
The CAT.
Yeah, and we found that very useful. And it's only costs about $400.
Yeah,
So
it's
and you do everything online. You get all these reports out and stuff. It tells you an awful lot about it.
It does, yeah. We're actually, we've been asked to do the CAT. We haven't done it yet, but that's probably not too far down the pike from us. You don't even know what I'm talking about yet, but y'all will. I think I want to say clearly that this is a place where there's all kinds of ideas and thoughts on this, and that the more we can talk about it, the more we can come up with ideas, the more creative we can get. Some years ago, long before my time, but another member of the stewardship ministry team, Joanna Geske, has talked about what was called the Alabama Plan. Any of y'all, Betty, you remember? Any of y'all remember that? Okay. Which my understanding.
You get like 10 people a year, you train them, and they're the head of your committee. The next year, you get 10 different people, and within about a few years, everybody's been trained.
Okay, that's not the part I was actually familiar with. So this is, like I said, before my time. But what Joanna was telling us that she remembered from that is the visiting of different people in the congregation, very much the going out, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong here, some of it's about, yeah, I'd like you to consider a gift, but a lot more of it is about, Susan, I'm really interested in what you're passionate about. So that there's connectedness in the community. I'd love to see us do that in the next few years. I mean, I think that's ambitious, but I think it's totally doable. I think some of what Terry was talking about with bread, that's the way to do it. I know in Chicago, it's always a little bit more, you've got to buzz the buzzer and set up the appointments. And I'm from the South and suburban land, so I'm constantly a little bit like, how do you do this in the city? But I'm learning. So I think those individual relationships and nurturing relationships one-on-one, and I think that's where at the beginning, when you have rectors and newcomer welcomers who are brave and bold and can say, welcome, we're glad you're here, here's what membership looks like. It includes this pledge card. Or if not a pledge card, because let's be clear, Gen X and Gen Y, millennials, many of us don't do pledge cards. We do relationship. And that, I mean, that's a whole other piece. If you haven't looked at generations and how generations give, you must. If you expect, this is my Gen Y exception, if you expect Gen Y to give you a pledge card, you're going to be disappointed. Because Gen Y, on the whole, is going to engage with you and probably give you some money, but they're not going to commit with that pledge card, because the minute they give you that pledge card, you're going to walk over here and pay attention to somebody else, and they'd like you to stay in a relationship with them. So that's a gross. Are you offended? Okay. I always have to check my Gen Y over here. So it's a gross overstatement. But if you haven't looked at, if you are a congregation as we are, which is diverse in age, we are very diverse in our age, for which I am daily sending up prayers of thanksgiving to God, because it's wonderful. You need to know how different generations give. My brother, who's 13 years younger than me, does not read books at all that are in print. He does not read anything that's not on the computer screen. He does not own a checkbook, so he can't put a check in the plate. He doesn't carry cash. So if you want my brother's money, you darn well better have an online way for him to pay, or you're not going to get it from him. You're just not, because he doesn't have a way to give to you otherwise. So, you know, those are the kind of things that are ongoing, I think, stewardship committees
That sounds like an excuse not to give a lot of things.
I don't know. I don't know many places that don't have an option for you to do that. See, I would say for the places my 26-year-old brother goes, pretty much every one of them, everyone, including his church, which he's a regular member, and gives online. But